Welcome back to another episode on the J.A.T side. It's your host, Jalen Austin Taylor. I'm back for another great episode tonight. I know it's been a couple weeks since I last dropped on the J.A.T side, but guess what? There's no better day than the present. So, super glad to be back. Today is July 16th. It's a little late episode tonight, but it's Wednesday, July 16th. So by the time you're listening to this, most likely it'll be at least 11 o'clock or later on the East Coast. If you're in Central Time, probably a little bit after 10. If you're on the West Coast, probably a little bit after 8 p.m. And then if you're anywhere else, then I'm not sure. But I can only speak for, the U.S. and people that are on Eastern Time, and Central, and of course Pacific. But I'm not going to waste too much time today. We're just going to hop straight into today's episode, which you can tell is about 6 lessons that I've learned in 6 weeks. Now, you may be wondering, well, what's so special about these last 6 weeks? Well, 6 weeks ago, or a little bit over 6 weeks ago, I started this new job, my first ever job, working for a company called Vector Marketing, who primarily sells Cutco cutlery. Now, some of you listening to this may be familiar with Cutco. Some of you listening to this may even work, for Vector Marketing, selling Cutco, whatever your kind of affiliations, or this might just be your first time hearing about, Cutco and Vector Marketing. So I really wanted to make this episode because I have really had the opportunity to change my life in the last 6 weeks. Most people would agree that I am a very hardworking person. I'm very, talented, and I have a lot of gifts from God that I've been blessed with, undoubtedly. But this opportunity by far has been one of the biggest blessings that I have experienced so far in my life. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So here's 6 lessons that I've learned in 6 weeks working for Vector Marketing, selling Cutco. So, number 1, hard work gets you the results that you want every single time. Now, hard work is the biggest variable to having success in anything, whether it's sports, work, or anything else. And a lot of times, hard work is simply, I think, undervalued by us because we get so sidetracked with trying to figure out the perfect way to do something, and trying to figure out like kind of the cheat code or like the easy way to do something. But hard work a lot of times is simply the best way to accomplish your goals. My mic is on. And hard work is something that can't be replicated. It can't be duplicated. And there is no substitute for hard work, no matter, how many cheat codes or, easy ways or any ways like you try to cut corners, shortcuts. There's no shortcuts to success. And I know if you're listening to this, you've probably heard that a million times, whether it's from your parents or people, who are older than you. They like to kind of say that. I know I've heard it a lot of times, especially playing basketball and football when I was younger. So, that's the first lesson I've learned is hard work gets you the results that you want every single time. Second lesson I learned is that failure is the biggest part of success. And I talked about hard work being one of the biggest components of success, but failure is actually, in my opinion, the biggest part of success, because failure teaches you the lessons that you have to learn to become successful. Failure allows you to experience what it feels like to not accomplish your goals, to not reach the heights that you want to reach, to have disappointment. And failure can create two types of people. Number one, it can create the type of person who gives up and uses discouragement as a way out of trying to strive to their goals and be the best version of themselves. Or it creates the type of person who goes after their goals even harder and uses that disappointment as fuel to make them even stronger. The third lesson I've learned is a bad day doesn't define you. Now, in sales, you will have bad days, and um, a bad day does not define you in any way. It doesn't mean that you're not good at your job. It doesn't mean that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. A bad day can simply be just because of the circumstances that you couldn't control around you. And we have limited control in this life. Life is like 90% of what happens to you. And remember, life is like 10% what happens to you, 90% how you respond to it. So that 10% you really can't control, but that 90%, how your life goes, is dictated by how you respond to the circumstances that are given to you. And that's the same thing with sales. You may not be able to control somebody canceling or rescheduling an appointment with you, but you can control how you respond to that. You can control what you do at that time and what you do to replace that, a canceled or rescheduled appointment, or that sale that you thought was going to be bigger, but it ended up not being as big as you wanted it to be. It's all about how you respond to those situations. The fourth lesson I've learned is learn and then remove the L. And some of you also may have heard this saying before, is like, you learn first and then you remove the L. Obviously, if you write out the word learn or just envision it in your head, then you take off the L, what does that leave you with? Earn. So you have to learn first before you earn. And, specifically with Cutco, you go through a couple of days of training before you were a certified sales rep. And you go through a couple of days of training, about 12 hours long in total. In certain areas, it may vary, but I know my training was about 12 hours. And they do that to ensure that you have learned the basics of the products, how to sell. And obviously, that's just the basic, that's the basic, most basic level, surface level learning you could get. But the real learning, I believe, is when you actually start working and you actually start to make, you start to make appointments, start scheduling appointments, and then you start doing appointments. Then you start to see how it kind of works, and then you learn from people that are around you. I think that's when the real learning starts. But the basic level learning is done in training. So learn, then remove the L. Then the fifth lesson I've learned is don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. This is something that, like I said, also applies to things that are outside of Cutco. So don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to take that leap and that step towards your goals, even if it may be something that is a little uncomfortable or a little weird kind of feeling. It's in the long run, it's going to be worth it, because even if you don't reach that goal, or even if you don't hit that level that you're trying to reach at the time, it's going to grow you as a person by even going after it, because you're pushing yourself to the next level. You're allowing yourself to have the opportunity to grow. But if you always stay kind of in the same mindset, in the same little space, mentally, mostly mentally, but also just physically, then you're never going to grow as much as you can. And then also, your growth is maybe held to a standstill because you don't ever challenge yourself to be better. And then finally, the sixth lesson I've learned in 6 weeks is, I kind of talked about it a little bit with number 5, but master being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if you can master being comfortable with being uncomfortable, then you're going to be very successful in life in general, in anything you do, because the best and the greatest in every field that you could think of have mastered being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what does this mean? It just means being able to go through the pain, being able to go through those tough circumstances and still being able to push past them and still reach, and still go towards your goals and towards your dreams and towards your aspirations, even if there may be obstacles, roadblocks, people saying you can't do it, life circumstances being thrown at you kind of all at one time. And the greatest have always pushed past those different versions of adversity, because all it is adversity. And like I said, life is about how you respond to that adversity. The greatest, the most successful people, they have mastered how to respond to adversity. And a lot of that is with being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I wanted to keep it short. I wanted to keep it brief tonight, but I hope this helps somebody. If it helped at least one person, then I did my job tonight. With that being said, that is going to be the end of today's episode. And until next time, I'm your host, J.A.T, and I'm out.